All right, so you plan on building your very first guitar and you're not really sure where to go with it. I'm going to go ahead and give you my tips and tricks on how to build your very first guitar from start to finish. So let's go ahead and start with guitar kits or raw bodies. First, I want to start off with guitar kits and raw bodies. If you're building a guitar kit and you do not plan on using any of the hardware or plan on changing out anything, I recommend taking the time to ensure that the screw holes on your pickguard, bridge, backplate, neck, etc. all line up with the pre-drilled factory holes. This will save you time and trouble down the road, especially with the pickguard and tremolo backplate. Same with your neck plate and or if you're swapping, let's say, a Fender or Squier neck onto a new body. I had to do this when I built my Tom DeLonge Blackout Stratocaster replica. The Squier neck did not line up at all with either the pre-drilled factory holes in the neck pocket, and it also did not line up with the new Tom DeLonge neck plate that I ordered specifically for this guitar. So that had to be modified. The factory holes had to be filled with dowel sticks and re-drilled to properly align with the new neck plate. Same with the actual neck, where I had to fill in the factory Squier neck screw holes that were pre-drilled from the factory and had to drill them to align with the new neck plate. So if you have to fill in the factory neck screw hole, I would recommend using a dowel stick. Now for the smaller holes like pickguard holes, jack plate holes, etc., I would use toothpicks and wood glue, but that's entirely up to you. You could use something like a small dowel stick if you can find one as small as the pickguard screw holes. Toothpicks are cheap, you get a ton of them, and because you don't need to use a lot of material, one toothpick can fill 1 or 2 holes off of one stick. So like I mentioned, if you don't plan on using any of your hardware, if you're changing pick guards, if you're changing pickups, etc., bridges, whatever, go ahead, order your stuff, or if you already have it ordered, before you start building the guitar and before you start painting it, take all of your new stuff, make sure that they line up with the factory pre-drilled holes. If they do not line up, go ahead and fill those and then re-drill them. It's as simple as that. Now, there's plenty of recommendations out there for how to prep the body for paint, and if the body isn't already painted, and we'll touch more on this in a little bit, you will need to seal the wood. Why seal the wood, you ask? Well, because wood is porous and it will absorb moisture, causing the wood to expand and contract with temperature and humidity. Will this cause your guitar to swell up so much that it explodes? Maybe. But it's good practice to ensure that you don't have any issues down the road, even if it isn't right away. Now, I normally use 2 cans of 2K clear coat. Why? Well, on my very first guitar build, I used Gracie's finishes. I did a full lacquer paint job on my surf green Tom DeLonge Stratocaster, and Gracie's sells what they call a sealer and a can. So putting 2 and 2 together, I decided at least with automotive paint, a 2K clear coat would be the best option to seal the wood with. Now that being said, if you're looking to fill wood grain, you could use a wood filler of sorts. That's up to you. It may also help cut down on the cost of your entire paint budget. I think 2 cans of 2K clear coat work well enough to fill in most wood grains. Unless you like that wood grain look, I would recommend using 1 can and calling it a day. After you apply your sealer, I would recommend waiting for about a minimum of 2 weeks before you move on to your next step. Entirely up to you, but the longer you wait for the sealer to cure and shrink, the better. As for prepping the body itself, I recommend sanding the raw, unsealed body with at least 220 to 320 grit sandpaper. Finer grits may work, but in my thinking, you would want to flatten the body out with 220 grit, let's say, and then apply the sealer to help lock everything in, allowing the clear coat to seep into the wood and ensure that no moisture gets through to your bare wood. As for cleaning off the body, a tack rag works well to remove sanding dust or compressed air. I also like to get a spray bottle with some rubbing alcohol. It is a good wax and grease remover in my opinion, and you can get it pretty cheap. Okay, so you've prepped the guitar, you sanded it flat for sealer, mocked up your new hardware and pickguard, filled and drilled new holes if needed, and sealed the body for painting. You've waited 2 weeks or so and you're ready to move on to paint, so let's go ahead and talk about that right now. As for paint, this is pretty straightforward. You're in the home stretch now, so I recommend using the same type of paint throughout the entire building process. So for instance, if you're using urethane automotive paint, let's say like I do for my builds, buy the primer, the paint, and the clear coat from the same company. Custom paints, House of Color, Eastwood, etc. Can you mix and match paints? Yes, but there's a little bit more information that you need to know. So Krylon sells both enamel and acrylic. Those may not be totally compatible with urethane and vice versa. You could spray a small test sample first to ensure their compatibility, and I get it, Krylon and Rust-Oleum are more affordable than a $30 can of urethane automotive-based paint. FYI, custom paints is the more affordable option for urethane-based automotive paints, but just ensure if you're mixing stuff first that it's compatible so you don't have any issues down the road where you have to strip the finish and start over again. Ask me how I know. Now, prepping the body for paint is as follows. You've had the guitar sealed and it's been a couple weeks and you're ready to start painting it. The sealer is cured, so now it's time to sand it and apply your primer. Grab some 400 grit sandpaper, 320 grit woodwork, but you may also have to apply multiple coats of the primer to level out any of the deeper scratches from sanding. I will say 2 to 3 coats of primer is more than enough, especially because you'll want those layers to cure properly. A week should be more than enough time. 2 to 3 days, I would say, should be your bare minimum wait time. This will just ensure that any of the deeper layers of primer have had time to cure properly so they don't continue to shrink later down the road, causing issues with your final finish. Let the primer cure and sand it flat. 400 grit is good for solid colors like white, black, green, blue, etc. If you're using a metallic or pearl color, I would recommend using 600 grit. This will ensure that the scratches aren't too deep because you will notice those scratch marks under the clear coat. Don't ask me how I know this. So 400 grit for solid base colors and 600 grit for anything with metallic or pearls in it. Now, if you're doing a 3-stage color, meaning you have to apply a solid base color coat first, then use 600 grit. The solid color base coat will slightly fill the scratch marks of 400 grit, but they may end up showing through on the pearl color. So for a 3-stage, which essentially is a solid base color, the pearl color, and then clear coat, I would recommend using 600 grit when sanding your primer. Something to keep in mind also, if you're using a metallic or a solid color, once you achieve full coverage, generally 2 to 3 coats, applying more isn't going to do much of anything besides eat up your time and your paint. So solid colors and metallics, once you achieve full coverage, meaning there is no primer showing through, you can allow it to flash off a bit and then move on to clear coat. And lastly, you should not have to sand in between coats. The only time you will ever need to do this is if you get a heavy run or run into any issues after you've started applying color. Most paint manufacturers develop modern paint to lay out smoother these days, so unless you run into any issues, just apply the color. Depending on the paint itself, I recommend waiting at least a minimum of 15 minutes in between each coat. This will allow enough time between coats for any solvents to flash off. Solvents need to flash off so you don't have any issues down the road with paint lifting or hazing after you apply your color and clear. One final note that I do want to mention, I try to stay a minimum of 6 to 8 inches away while spraying. Some paint needs a further distance to be sprayed at, and in my experience, Krylon and Rust-Oleum, you need to be about 10 inches away or more from the body. Take that into account when you work on your next build. Okay, now we're at the last little bit. This one will be quick. If you're using a 2K clear coat, you will need to activate it. Normally, there's a small pin on the bottom of the can that you either have to push in or pull out. Keep that in mind because if you don't activate it, releasing the hardener inside of the can, your clear coat will never cure properly and you're basically going to have to start over. Clear coat is simple. Apply the clear, making sure that you do not apply too much, causing it to run. Too wet and it may run or sag, which will effectively stop further coats because you'll need to sand those out. That's going to cause time issues where you'll need to wait a few days, sand the whole guitar, and apply more clear coat. Light, even coats. You want to see some gloss, but not make it so wet that it starts to run or sag. And you definitely do not want to apply too light of a coat that it looks dry. Apply the whole can, or if you're using a spray gun setup, I would recommend at least a minimum of 4 or 5 coats. This will give you enough room to cut and buff the guitar after it's cured. And this is my own opinion, but I give the guitar at least a minimum of 3 weeks to fully cure. Some people say you can assemble the guitar after a couple of weeks, but for me and the paint company that I tend to use, I've found that 3 weeks is the bare minimum before cutting, buffing, and assembling. Okay, we're at the final stage. At this point, it should have taken you somewhere around a month or so to get to this point. Now I know it sucks waiting, but we're almost finished and you shouldn't have any issues at this point. Everything looks good and you're ready to play this thing, but one last step before we build it. Now, something that I want to mention, you do not have to wet sand. While wet sanding does help increase the cutting power and the longevity of your sandpaper, you need to worry about getting water into the screw holes, ferrule holes, or neck screw holes, etc. I skip wet sanding for the most part, unless the guitar body itself has a limited number of water entry points. Think like cheaper Squires with a hardtail string through bridge rather than a string through ferrule. Or like a Les Paul where the back doesn't have any neck screws or ferrules. So I guess what I would say, it just depends. Alternatively, you can use screw wax. Most hardware stores sell it, or you can order it off of your favorite website like Amazon. Add screw wax to all of your screw holes, like the pickguard, the bridge, the neck screws, etc., and then you can wet sand. Now, this is entirely up to you. If you're happy with the finish and the clear coat looks good, no runs or orange peel, or at least a minimum orange peel, you should be good to assemble the guitar. But if you need to cut it flat and buff it out, here's what I do. Depending on how bad the clear coat is, like if it had runs in the clear coat, or if the finish looks really ripply like the skin of an orange, hence the name orange peel, I will sand the clear coat with 1500 or 2000 grit to start. 2000 grit should be a good grit to start off with if the finish doesn't look too terrible. But if there's noticeable issues, then I use 1500. Sand it flat with either 1500 or 2000 grit until the whole guitar looks like it has a matte uniform finish. You shouldn't be able to see any glossy spots at all. If you see glossy spots, that means that you have a low spot in either the body or something underneath shrink causing that. For the most part, you'll want to flatten that out as much as possible. Do not sand so much that you break through the clear coat down to the paint. Once it's flattened out and uniform looking, you can then go ahead and buff it out. Now, if you ended up using 1500, go directly to 2000 grit to refine those deeper scratches that the 1500 grit left. 2000 grit the body one more time and then you're golden. And yes, if you really want to, you can go all the way up to 3000, 5000 grit, etc. I think 2000 grit is plenty fine. 3000 grit, if you really don't want to work as hard buffing the guitar, that's up to you. As for buffing the guitar, I use a 3-inch cordless drill attachment. You can get the whole kit off Amazon or eBay for around $30 or so, depending on how much shipping costs. For compound, use a 2-step cutting and polishing compound. I like Meguiar's. Mothers also makes some affordable compounds. 3M has some really good options, but they're a little bit more expensive. There's also Presta and Wizard, so take that into consideration. It's entirely up to you. I would like to mention the wool pad works best for the cutting compound, but you have to keep this in mind. It will get much hotter than the foam pads. Also, the wool pads kind of need to be activated in sorts. You'll want to wash the pad first and make sure it's damp, but not drenched and dripping water. You can use a harder foam pad if you want. Foam pads generally don't get as hot as quickly, but they will soak up more of the compound. As for the finishing compound, I use a soft foam pad. Start with the compound that buffs out the scratches first. For the Meguiar stuff that I use, it's their Mirror Glaze Pro Speed Compound 100. This removes or buffs out these scratches up to 2000 grit. You'll most likely have to do a couple of passes with this stuff to get these scratches out fully. Dab a little compound on the pad and spread it around. Like I mentioned earlier, the wool pad I think works best for the first step cutting compound, or a harder, denser foam pad. Once you're happy with the first step, swap out your pad for your next buffing pad and move on to the next step. I like to use, again, Meguiar's Mirror Glaze Ultra Finishing Polishing Compound, which is their M205 polish. Dab a little on the pad, spread it around, and polish everything out. This step is the most satisfying because you get to see your newly built guitar all polished up and looking pretty sweet. I also just want to throw this in here. If the sides of the guitar don't look terrible, I generally do not cut and buff those. For me, the sides seem to come out flat enough that I just leave them alone. I only really cut and buff the front and the back of the guitar. So once you're happy with the finish, you can then go ahead and apply some wax and call it a day. Go ahead and assemble it. Put your neck on, screw in your pickguard, bridge, jack plate, etc. Solder and wire it up, ground the bridge, plug it in. Do the tap test before you throw your strings on it to ensure that the pickup or pickups work and everything is wired, grounded, and working. Something else I want to throw in here really quick If you have a hardtail bridge with string ferrules, you can use a soldering iron to heat up the ferrule, 3 to 5 seconds max. This will help soften the cured clear coat enough that it will allow you to tap the ferrule into the body without cracking or chipping the new clear coat. Just be sure not to heat it up for too long, or you will cause the paint to bubble from the heat, causing more of an issue. So 3 to 5 seconds max for that tip. Okay, and I want to go ahead and throw this in here really quick. If you're new to the channel, I do already have a standalone video on this topic, but I want to breeze over it really quick. If you have a guitar that you got off eBay or Facebook Marketplace and the paint itself is still in good shape, no chips or cracks, and you just want to paint it to make it your own, you can use 400 grit, sand it flat, and apply either a primer or go directly over it with your color. That being said, like I mentioned earlier, if you're using a pearl or metallic, you will want to use 600 grit instead. Now, what if it's cracked or chipped? I recommend using something like a 2-part epoxy stick or even a 2-part liquid epoxy to help fill in any chips. As for cracks, let's say that there's a big crack, but the paint itself is still intact, meaning you could lift the crack up with a fingernail. You could either use super glue or a 2-part liquid epoxy to glue it back to the wood. Alternatively, you could sand it all off, but that would require you to have to sand down the rest of the body, so a lot more work at the end of the day. I have seen videos of people using a heat gun to help soften the existing paint, but that's entirely up to you on how you want to tackle it. One last tidbit. Tuners can sometimes be a pain, and if you're installing locking tuners that require you to drill into the headstock, I highly recommend picking up a StewMac tuner pin drill jig. This is going to give you the best chance at getting all of the tuner pinholes drilled in line and accurately, and then accurately drilled for the width of the pins as well. I've built about 10 guitars so far, and honestly wish I would have pulled the trigger on one of these from the get-go. Eyeballing it with a ruler and pen, while it does work in a sense, they sometimes don't come out perfect, but the StewMac tuner pin drill jig ensures that you get it right every time. And trust me, once you build one guitar, you will want to build another. Well, that's it. Tell me what you guys and gals think of this video. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments. I will answer them to the best of my ability. If you like this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up, give it a like. If you didn't like this video, also give it a thumbs up. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit all the buttons. I'm Jordan, and I'll catch you guys next time. Peace.